that unlike Odell Beckham Jr., Chris, there isn't an arrest warrant out for you from the New Orleans authorities this morning. Can you confirm that for us here as you come on?
I can currently confirm there's no arrest warrant out for me, but I can't make any promises. It was New Orleans. I get it, Odell. Crazy stuff happens. But Odell was, as somebody who was on that field post-game, Odell was certainly in a jubilant, maybe kind of influenced by other substance is a strong word, by some libation mood, for sure.
I think you were on the field when Tua hit Devontae Smith for the touchdown pass in Atlanta. I know you were at the game. But did the post-game Monday night exceed even the craziness that was brought about by Tua to Devontae a couple of 3 years ago? Watching on television, it just seemed, and I guess you should expect this. This is LSU we're talking about in New Orleans on top of that. What was that scene exactly like being there in person?
Yeah, it was pretty. I don't know if the seconds after the championship was won were quite as explosive as that Devontae Smith play. I mean, I think we were probably both on the field at the time. I was there as Devontae Smith essentially crossing the end zone. I was in that back end zone as well. But the actual the celebration in New Orleans was crazy. I mean, it was just first of all, LSU alum after LSU alum, Jarvis Landry was literally just running around hugging everybody in the world, saying I needed this for my heart over and over again. It was OBJ was arguing with security guards, LSU fans, and had kind of snuck onto the field in a couple cases. It looks like the players were just obviously jubilant. It was just a really interesting scene. And then you get to the locker room and you walk in, and it literally a cloud of cigar haze exited the doors as they opened. It was a really interesting scene for sure.
Now give us your you've been to more than a couple of these now. Give us your favorite CFP championship game venue. Is it New Orleans in a landslide? Atlanta, Tampa, Santa Clara, Pasadena? What's at the top of the list for you, Chris?
I've never personally been to Pasadena, but I can't imagine anything's better than the Rose Bowl. The city, New Orleans, probably for sure, but the actual venue itself, nobody wants to hear media complaints, so I'll spare everybody, but it has some inconveniences in terms of the structure of the press box. I thought Atlanta was top-notch. I really enjoy that city. Obviously, Mercedes-Benz is quite a nice stadium, so my vote would be Atlanta, but I'm sure nothing can match the majesty of the Rose Bowl. It's a place I've always wanted to go and hope to one day.
Yeah, plus that Mercedes-Benz Stadium, they've got that Carvel soft serve ice cream machine in the press box, and that's kind of a deal closer for me just in terms of a venue. But as far as a all-encompassing type of setup, it's hard to beat New Orleans, man, with the French Quarter right there and how everything sort of funnels right into the dome and all around. For me, it's New Orleans. I was at that 2010 Alabama-Texas game for the BCS championship. And, yeah, I mean, the Rose Bowl it's a bucket list. If you're a college football fan, at some point you've got to make that trip. But as far as tying in everything, practices and the events leading up to the game, the problem with places like L.A. And even South Florida is that the event gets kind of lost just in everyday life in LA. I mean, there's 100 different things going on in LA that have the attention of folks in that area. And then you try to incorporate a football game that isn't the traditional Rose Bowl. And there is a difference, by the way. There's the Rose Bowl, which, of course, is the Big Ten and the Pac-12 representatives. And then there's the championship game for the college football playoff. And it's, from what I can understand anyway, just a totally different feel when you talk about those two. So, Chris, let's talk about the aftermath. Speaking of hangovers, LSU getting hit pretty hard here in the last couple of days, both from a coaching and talent perspective, I guess. it's a sort of situation that Alabama can relate to, no doubt.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see. I think LSU is like, you get that championship feeling. You wake up a little hungover the next day, and then you realize like you're going to take literally like gut punch after gut punch in terms of guys leaving early. Like Joe Brady leaves like less than 24 hours after the championship is won to the Carolina Panthers. In a lot of cases, you can't blame any of these guys for testing the water. Like you accomplished everything there is to accomplish in your college career. In a lot of cases, I mean, outside of a degree, but these guys are mostly going to end up making a lot of money in the NFL. So it's just, I think LSU's in a situation where it could lose as many as like 14 starters off this championship team heading into next season. I know, like, living in Austin, there's a lot of Texas fans excited about all this news that's been kind of popping up for the last couple of days, because I think I personally expected LSU to take not like a significant step back next year, but I don't expect them to be a favorite in any capacity. And I think kind of losing guys like Patrick Queen, guys who are on the fence of coming back in the first place, really kind of solidifies the notion that LSU is going to have, not rebuilding necessarily, but at least a year of reloading to kind of get back to anything close to what this season was.
Which Joe will be tougher to replace for LSU, Joe Brady or Joe Burrow? And I know on the surface that probably sounds ridiculous, but when you look at the difference in that offense from 18 to 19 and the difference in Joe Burrow from 18 to 19, it makes me wonder which of those Joes is going to be toughest for Ed Orgeron to replace.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think you could probably look at it two ways. Like, from an on the field perspective, the guy who makes the biggest difference, it's Joe Burrow. Like, the guy just had the greatest season at least the greatest passing season by a quarterback all time. Like, you can argue like Cam Newton or something at a different space for what he did as a rusher, but nobody's ever passed better than Joe Burrow. And I think no matter what happens with Miles Brennan next year, or Derek King potentially, or whoever LSU kind of looks at as the starter, it's going to there's going to be a significant drop off. And I think that's Joe Burrow won LSU at least 2 games last season just on his own. The Texas game and the Auburn game, and maybe even the Florida game, are the 3 I kind of look at as, without Joe Burrow, that team loses and doesn't win a national championship. From a long-term perspective, you might argue Joe Brady, but I've always kind of understood Joe Brady was a guy that wanted to be in the NFL. This wasn't going to be like a forever position for him. And honestly, like, if you have the choice between doing what you want to do as an offensive coordinator on the college level or the NFL level, it's a pretty easy choice, in my opinion, because talking to 17-year-olds every day is a pretty it's kind of it's something I don't know if everybody wants to deal with all the time. So that wasn't going to stay forever. And, like, you lose coordinators all the time in college. Sorry, I'm talking in circles a little bit. They have Jorge Munoz as their offensive analyst. He's a Louisiana Lafayette guy. Pretty likely, at least it makes a lot of sense, that he would kind of take over as Joe Brady's role as passing game coordinator along with Steve Ensminger. I think there's a natural successor there. Joe Brady got a lot of attention, but at the end of the day, Joe Brady's in the press box calling plays, and Joe Burrow just had the greatest season of all time as a quarterback. So I lean pretty heavily towards Joe Burrow.
True or false time for you. Chris Hummer, national college football writer for 247sports.com. True or false, Chris, Miles Brennan and Mac Jones will be the starting quarterbacks for LSU and Alabama in their respective 2020 season openers?
False. I have to, at least one of them, I would imagine, is not going to start. I think I'm of the opinion Bryce Young is going to be the best quarterback in Alabama's room once he walks on the campus. I guess he's already on campus, so I'm of the opinion Bryce Young is already the best quarterback in that room. It might not be right away, but I expect Bryce to win that job. LSU has some moving pieces right now. I think the coaching staff situation needs to be settled before we know a little bit more about transfer quarterbacks. But there's been some buzz about Derek King for a while now. I think Oregon, Arkansas, and Miami are certainly going to factor into that mix. But if Derek King ends up in LSU, I think we all know who the starter is. So it's a compelling question for sure. I don't have a for sure answer right now.
assuming, and I don't think we're assuming, Clemson still an overwhelming favorite to return to the college football playoff in a year's time. Not just because Trevor Lawrence comes back and Justin Ross comes back and still a wealth of talent, and Dabo's got more on the way, more so because of the affiliation with the Atlantic Coast Conference as anything else. We assume very much so that Clemson's there again next year. I think it's going to be a relatively safe assumption anyway that Ohio State gets back there next year. If you had to look at a couple of teams for those other two spots today, where would you look as far as teams most likely to fill out a Final Four in a year's time?
Yeah, I would say don't overlook Penn State next year. Penn State returns a lot, and they're not quite as explosive as Ohio State, but I think Penn State gets Ohio State and Happy Valley this year.
Wow.
So that could be something. But the other two teams I would probably look at are kind of the usual suspects. You have Alabama, Florida, Georgia, LSU. I think Alabama, in my opinion, should be the favorite of those four heading into next season. You have Oregon, which I think has a super friendly path to the playoff, probably more than anybody besides Clemson. And Oregon just needs to kind of get its quarterback situation sorted out, whether that's a graduate transfer or having Tyler Show, a four-star passer from the 2018 class, as their starter. And then Oklahoma. I know we've heard a lot. Oklahoma's gotten spanked for the last couple of years in the playoffs, but I fully believe Oklahoma is in position to be better next season, despite losing Jalen Hurts and Murray, their middle linebacker. They bring back a lot on defense, and I think Spencer Rattler raises kind of the ceiling there from a offensive perspective. So kind of the usual suspects, but those are the teams I would look at the most. So
you think Lincoln stands pat with his returning quarterback room instead of maybe hitting up that portal himself, and Spencer Rattler, highly recruited guy in the last cycle or so, transitions into the successor of Jalen Hurts, Chris?
Yeah, I do. I don't think they're going to go portaling this year. Spencer Rattler's the real deal.
Portaling.
They are
like
very
that.
Excited about him and Norman. Yeah.
Portaling. I like that. I like that approach. Hey, and you talked about Oregon. I think we got Ohio State in Eugene in week 2 in 2020, I believe. So that could be very interesting as well. Hey, Chris, as always, we appreciate the time. Again, we wanted to give you a couple of days to sort of detox from just being around all of it. We're not accusing you of anything, okay? We're just saying just being around that stuff, and everything down there, you can contract some issues. So, hey, we appreciate it, Chris. Always great stuff here on the show. Always love your work there at 247sports.com as well.
I appreciate that. I'm fully hydrated again after all the kind of celebrating you can do on bourbon. So yeah. I appreciate you giving me some time to recover.